The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the rocky cliffs of ancient Utah in pale gold. A dry wind brushed over the ground, stirring small clouds of dust that danced between the ferns. For a few moments, everything seemed still, until the camera caught movement in the shadows. There, half hidden among the rocks, crouched a pack of Utahraptors. Their feathers shimmered faintly under the morning sun, colored in dark reds and browns, blending perfectly with the land around them. Each eye glowed with intelligence, sharp, focused, and waiting. They were silent hunters built for teamwork and precision. The leader, larger, more scarred, and calmer than the others, raised his head slightly. His nostrils flared as he tested the air. The faint scent of prey drifted toward him. He turned his gaze to the horizon. Far ahead, a small herd of herbivorous dinosaurs grazed near the river. Without a sound, the leader's tail twitched once at the signal. Instantly, the rest of the pack began to move, each step measured and quiet. Their claws didn't scrape against the rock. Their breathing was steady. They were ghosts in the dawn. They began to circle the herd. One by one, each Utahraptor took a position. One to the left, two to the right, and three behind a ridge that overlooked the valley. It wasn't chaos. It was a plan. The Utahraptor leader had hunted here many times before. He knew the land, the cracks where prey might stumble, the rocks that offered cover, the paths that led to the river. Every inch of this place was part of his strategy. Below them, the herbivores grazed peacefully, unaware of the danger above. They were small, fast dinosaurs, covered in green scales, their heads low to the ground as they fed. Occasionally, one would lift its head, sniffing the air, but smelling only the wind. The leader tilted his head slightly. His golden eyes reflected the sunlight. His feathers rippled in the breeze. Then he moved. The signal was clear. Attack. From the ridge, 3 Utahraptors leapt almost at once. The sound was sudden and violent, claws scraping rock, wings of dust rising behind them. The herd panicked. Dinosaurs screamed and scattered in all directions. The first prey stumbled, its foot caught in a crack. A raptor pounced, claws digging deep into flesh. The others followed, cutting off escape routes, moving like a single organism. The leader ran forward faster than any of them. He jumped onto a fallen tree, used it as a springboard, and landed directly on the largest herbivore. His weight knocked it to the ground. The impact sent a small tremor through the dirt. He didn't roar. He didn't need to. The silence of power was enough. The air filled with the noise of struggle, the prey's desperate cries, the thuds of claws hitting flesh, the quick hissing breaths of the hunters. Utahraptors weren't just strong. They were smart. One distracted the prey from the front while another attacked from behind. Their communication was subtle, a flick of a tail, a snap of jaws, a short hiss. They didn't need words. The battle lasted only moments. When it ended, the valley fell silent again, except for the slow rustle of leaves and the soft hum of insects. The prey lay still. The Utahraptors stood over it, chests rising and falling. Then the leader stepped closer. His feathers were stained with dust and blood. He looked around, scanning the horizon. No rivals, no danger, only victory. The others waited patiently as he took the first bite. That was the rule of the pack. Then, one by one, they joined in, feeding calmly. This was how they survived, not through chaos or brute force, but through discipline and cooperation. For a few brief moments, the valley was at peace again. As the pack fed, one young Utahraptor, smaller and less experienced, lifted its head. It heard something, a faint vibration, almost too low to notice. The leader paused, his jaws still. He listened too. Then it came again, a deep rumble far away but powerful enough to make the ground tremble slightly. The birds in the trees took off suddenly, crying out. The Utahraptors froze. The sound grew louder. Something big was moving through the forest beyond the river. The leader's feathers puffed slightly, an instinctive sign of warning. The others stepped back from the carcass, forming a semicircle around it. From the shadows between the trees, the shape began to appear, massive, dark, and slow. Each step it took made the earth vibrate. It wasn't another raptor. It wasn't even part of their world of small, fast hunters. This was something else entirely, The leader hissed softly, his head low, his claws digging into the ground. The pack was ready to defend its meal. The trees swayed as the creature emerged into the sunlight. A giant predator, scales glinting, muscles shifting under its skin, a mouth full of teeth like knives. It was a Giganotosaurus, one of the largest carnivores of the Cretaceous. The Utahraptors were dwarfed by it, but they didn't run. The leader stood tall, feathers bristling. He hissed again, louder this time. The others joined him. Their combined sound echoed through the valley like a storm about to break. The Giganotosaurus lowered its head, eyes burning with hunger. It took a step forward, then another, testing their courage. The Utahraptors spread out, surrounding the carcass. For a moment, neither side moved. The air between them was heavy and silent. Then the Giganotosaurus roared, a deep, earth-shaking sound that sent flocks of birds scattering from the trees. The Utahraptors didn't flinch. The leader hissed one last time, and the standoff began. The fight for survival was far from over. The carcass lay between the rocks, still warm, dust settling around it in soft golden clouds. The pack stood in a half-circle, bodies low, eyes forward. No one moved. Even the wind seemed to wait. The leader tilted his head and listened. The sound that had spooked them in the last moments of the hunt was back, low, steady, heavy. It rolled through the valley like distant thunder. They had guarded kills before. They had driven away smaller thieves, lone dromaeosaurs, bold scavenger birds, even young allosaurs testing their luck. But this was different. This sound came from something that did not need luck. It took what it wanted. The youngest Utahraptor shifted his weight, spreading his claws slightly into the dirt. The leader turned his eyes to him for a heartbeat, and the youngster froze again. The message was clear: hold, obey, wait. A single breath passed through the pack, shared tension, shared purpose. Then the leader took 2 quiet steps forward and placed himself between the carcass and the approaching shadow. The trees at the river edge trembled. A branch cracked. A dark shape moved into the light and paused. Dust drifted across its snout and caught in the sunlight. The Giganotosaurus watched them, one eye half-lidded, as if bored. But it was not bored. It was measuring. The leader kept his head low and his tail level, the posture of a hunter ready to spring, but not foolish enough to strike first. 2 adults flanked him on either side. Behind them, 3 more formed a second line. The juveniles stayed in the back, pressed to the rock. No calls, no hissing yet. Silence meant control. Giganotosaurus stepped forward once, then twice. Its feet pressed the ground until water bled up through the sand. It lowered its head and tasted the air over the carcass. The leader advanced a step of his own. Not a challenge, not a rush, a boundary. Giganotosaurus understood boundaries, but it understood hunger better. It tipped its jaw slightly, showing a row of teeth long as daggers. A slow exhale blew dust over the Utahraptor's feathers. The leader did the only thing that worked against impossible size. He changed the rules. He glanced right, only a twitch, and one raptor slipped away along the rock face, out of the giant's forward vision. Then the leader looked left, and another raptor matched the move. They would not meet size with force. They would use angles, timing, and the giant's blind spots. The big predator waited, reading them. It had fought before. It had killed things that were faster and smarter than themselves. But Utahraptors were not just fast or smart. They were organized. A pack was a machine. The leader was the engine. One more step from Giganotosaurus. The ground trembled through the Utahraptor's toes. The juvenile flinched. The leader flicked his tail once. Steady. The youngster pressed lower and went still again. The standoff could not last forever. The carcass drew flies. The sun climbed higher. Heat pressed down on feathers and scales and made tempers thin. The leader changed tempo. He feinted right, just a body shift and a soft hiss, while the raptor on the left broke into a short burst of speed, crossing the giant's field of view and cutting back behind a rock. It looked like panic. It was bait. Giganotosaurus snapped its head after the moving body, a predator's instinct. That one heartbeat of attention was the opening. The leader surged forward 3 quick steps and raked his sickle claw across the carcass, dragging it half a meter toward the rocks. Not a theft, just a reposition. The pack's lines shifted with him, keeping the giant at the edge of reach. The big predator corrected instantly, sharp and fast despite its size, and swung its head back toward the leader. The Utahraptor didn't retreat. He froze. He stared into that single sunlit eye and did not blink. Another Utahraptor, one from the second line, took the cue and slipped around the rear of the carcass. Now the pack had 3 angles. The giant had 1. Giganotosaurus understood the math. It tried a new tactic: pressure. It opened its jaws and gave a short, hard roar, not a display, a weapon. The sound cracked against stone and chest both. The juvenile squealed. The leader hissed once, warning sharp as a spine. The squeal cut off. Silence again. Order again. Giganotosaurus stepped to the side, trying to force them to compress, to bunch up and give it a single mass to crush. The leader mirrored, keeping the formation wide. He would not let the pack become 1 target. He would make it 5. He would make it 7. The fight, when it came, did not look like a movie. There was no single charge, no clean collision. It came in bursts, blinding fast and then still as statues. The leader darted in and slashed at the giant's lower lip. Another raptor nipped at the ankle and danced away before the foot could stomp. The giant snapped left. The Utahraptor was already gone. It whipped its tail. Another raptor was already beneath the arc. The pack fought like smoke. When the giant tried to grasp them with timing, the timing dissolved. But smoke can still burn. The big predator feinted with its jaws and then used the weight of its head like a hammer. The leader took the blow on his shoulder and rolled with it, claws plowing a deep furrow in the dust. He stood at once, no limp, no wince. But he had felt it. Size always lands eventually. He changed the plan again. The carcass was not worth broken ribs. The pack would not die to keep it. They would trade space for time. He hissed twice, quick and clipped. A code. 2 raptors moved up the slope, kicking stones. 1 stone struck the giant's snout. It blinked. The leader dragged the carcass another meter toward the choke point between 2 rocks, the only place where the giant could not pivot cleanly. Giganotosaurus saw it and rushed. It did not sprint. Too heavy to stop if it missed, but it committed, lowering its head and using its weight like a battering ram. The ground vibrated as it came on. The leader didn't meet it head-on. He broke the pack into 2 flows, 1 left, 1 right, opening a narrow lane that led the giant past the carcass rather than through it. The big head swept through the gap like a boulder in a stream, and the raptors were the water, splitting, circling, reforming behind it. By the time the giant corrected its turn, the carcass was already deeper between the rocks, and 3 raptors stood in the tight space, too narrow for a crushing step. The giant hesitated. A small hesitation, but real. It understood that the next rush might trap its foot or flank against stone, and trapped flesh tears. Even giants bleed out. The leader took a calm step forward. Not a bluff, a principle. We will not fight your way. We will not run your way. We will make you choose between hunger and injury. Choose carefully. The giant exhaled, slow and hot. The flies drifted in the breath and then settled again. A long minute passed with no movement at all. The valley held its breath with them. Then, without sound, Giganotosaurus turned its head toward the river. There were other food paths. Calves, turtles, fish in shallow pools. It had tested the pack and found the cost too high for the prize before it. It took 1 step back, then another, then turned away with the lazy confidence of a creature that does not often have to retreat. The leader did not chase. He did not celebrate. He adjusted his stance and finally, let the tension drain from his shoulders. The juvenile crept forward and touched his muzzle to the leader's side for a heartbeat, a question and a thank you both. The leader allowed it, then flicked his tail. Eat quickly, then move. They fed in order. Leader, adults, juvenile. Fast bites rather than full bellies. The sun had climbed. Heat made the meat sour faster, and heat also woke other rivals they had no time to meet today. When they were done, the leader gave a short, crisp hiss. The pack lifted the carcass together and dragged what remained into the shade to finish later, if later came. They left no bones in the open. Bones tell stories, bones draw mouths. As the pack crossed the ridge, The leader paused and looked back at the river. Giganotosaurus did not return. A long ripple on the surface showed where it had moved away through reeds like an armored boat. The leader watched until the ripple disappeared, then turned and followed his family into the rocks. Behind them, the valley returned to its normal sounds. Flies, birds, the small business of small lives. Ahead of them, the land opened into a maze of ledges and thorn trees, their home ground, mapped into memory by 1,000 careful steps. The juvenile trotted beside the leader now, copying his stride. It stumbled once on a loose stone. The leader did not look down, but he slowed half a step so the youngster could find the rhythm again. Learning happens at the edge of failure. He would keep the youngster at the edge, never past it. They climbed to a lookout ledge and lay down in the shade. The heat pressed like a hand. The pack slept in turns, 2 awake, watching. The rest with eyes slit but ears open. Predators who sleep deeply do not keep territories long. When the air finally cooled, the leader rose and shook dust from his feathers. He scanned the far slope where evening light drew long shadows and counted shapes. Herd there, birds there, nothing big in motion. Good. He set off again with the pack along a narrow path that only their feet remembered, past a broken tree that marked a water seep, past a white stone that caught the moon. The juvenile kept glancing back toward the river, where the giant had stood, but each time it looked forward again more quickly. Curiosity, then duty. That was how a Utahraptor grew into the role the pack needed. Night would bring new sounds, owls, insects, small teeth in the grass. But the message of the day would remain in every footprint they left. This land is not ruled by size alone. It is ruled by those who can think together. The leader lifted his head to the evening wind and tasted the air. No thunder, no giant breath. Only dust, fern, and the faint iron tang of their own work. He moved on without a backward glance. The juvenile followed, step for step, tail level at last. Morning in the canyon began without noise. The air was still, the stones cold, and the first light slid down the cliff like a blade. Utahraptor eyes opened one by one, gold reflections cutting through the dim. The leader stretched, claws scraping the dust, and rose without sound. Around him, the rest of the pack followed the rhythm. No words, no calls, just movement that said everything. The smallest member, the juvenile, stumbled as it got up. Its tail brushed against an older female. She hissed, quick and short, not out of anger but as a reminder. Space means order. In a Utahraptor pack, every step has a rule. The leader walks first, the guards next, the learner last. That's how they survive. The leader sniffed the air and caught the scent of dried blood, faint and far. Not fresh enough to hunt, but close enough to mark. Territory meant everything. It wasn't only about food. It was about control. In this world, if you didn't defend your ground, you didn't eat long. He moved toward the ridge. The pack followed, forming a loose line. Below, the valley opened wide, cut by a thin stream and dotted with ferns. In that green lay the traces of others. Not just prey, tracks like theirs, but smaller. The leader lowered his head. Another pack had crossed here in the night. The female to his right growled softly, waiting for his signal. He didn't give one yet. Instead, he crouched and pressed a claw into the print. The edges were sharp, less than half a day old. They were not alone anymore. They moved downhill in silence. Even the juvenile knew not to chatter or rustle. Only the wind spoke, carrying the smell of distant carrion and something else. Wet feathers. Utahraptor feathers. Outsiders. At the river bend, the leader stopped. Across the shallow water, 3 shapes stood. Not giants, just raptors like them, but strangers. One of them carried a scar across the neck. Another had a broken tail tip. Scavengers, maybe loners who had grouped together for safety. Both sides watched. The leader of the rival group tilted his head, half curious, half warning. There was no sound, but the air between them was full of meaning. The young Utahraptor tried to peek from behind the rock. The old female flicked her tail across his snout. Don't move. Don't show weakness. The rival leader took 2 steps forward into the water. It was a test. The pack leader answered by scraping his claw through the sand, a line between them. The rival stopped, looked at the line, and hissed. The sound wasn't loud, but it made every bird nearby take off from the trees. The leader hissed back, longer, lower. His pack spread slightly to the sides, forming a crescent. The message was simple. You can cross that line, but you will pay in blood. The rival raptors hesitated. They weren't many, only 3, but they were hungry. The middle one, the scarred one, crouched lower as if ready to sprint. The juvenile shifted behind the leader. He felt the tension, the question. Will there be a fight? The leader didn't move, not yet. In a Utahraptor pack, patience was as deadly as claws. The rival pack moved first. Not an attack, just a feint. One darted to the side, splashing water to distract. Another ran along the stones, circling slightly. The leader of the home pack didn't react right away. He waited until they came closer, until he saw their coordination fail. They weren't a real pack, just individuals acting together. That was their weakness. He gave one short hiss. His group exploded into motion. 2 adults lunged forward, intercepting the rivals mid-step. Claws slashed, tails swung, feathers flew. The river churned with mud and blood. The juvenile stayed behind the rock, trembling, but watched everything. The old female kept him in check, tail wrapped protectively in front of him like a wall. The leader leapt across the shallow stream and crashed into the scarred rival. They rolled, teeth snapping inches from each other's faces. The leader used his weight to push the other's head underwater. The rival thrashed, gasping bubbles, then twisted and escaped with a torn cheek. The remaining outsiders turned and ran. One limped, dragging its leg. They disappeared into the reeds, leaving streaks of blood in the mud. The pack didn't chase far. Territory was defended, not destroyed. They stopped at the water's edge, panting. The leader looked back at the juvenile. Their eyes met. Lesson learned. Control before fury. By noon, the heat pressed heavy on feathers and ground alike. The Utahraptors lay in the shade of the canyon wall, licking blood from claws and watching the horizon. The battle was over, but the day's rule still held. The land must always be claimed again. Every sunrise resets ownership. The leader walked to the ridge where they had first smelled the strangers. He raised his claws and dragged 3 long lines into the dirt, fresh marks. Then he rubbed his side along the rock, leaving a faint dust of feathers and scent. A clear sign to any wanderer. This valley belongs to them. The juvenile followed, copying the motion. His lines were crooked and small, but the leader didn't correct him. Every rule starts as imitation. When the youngster finished, the leader tapped his shoulder with the curve of his claw. Approval. The old female brought the remains of a small kill, dropping it between the rocks. They ate in turns again. Leader, adults, juvenile last. No fights, no noise. The sound of bones cracking was the only rhythm. As the sun dropped lower, orange light filled the canyon. Shadows grew long across the ground, making the raptors' silhouettes stretch like ancient ghosts. The leader climbed the highest rock and looked over the valley. For now, it was theirs. But he knew it would never truly be safe. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, other packs were doing the same, marking, hunting, surviving. He gave one short, calm hiss, the sound that meant, move before dark. The pack rose as one and vanished into the dusk. The heat of the day was finally breaking. Long shadows crawled over the canyon, painting the rocks in deep orange and gray. The Utahraptors were silent now. They had slept through the heat, saving their energy for this moment. The hunt. The leader stood on a flat rock looking down at the valley. His golden eyes caught the last light of the sun. Every feather on his back twitched as the wind shifted. It carried the smell they'd been waiting for. Fresh meat, alive and close. Deadliest. Big, heavy, and dangerous. A single one could feed the whole pack, but it could also crush them with one kick. The leader knew that. That's why they hunted only when the light began to fade, when their colors blended with dusk and their eyes saw better than their preys. He turned his head slowly. Behind him, 5 others waited. 2 adults, 2 sub-adults, and the small juvenile from before. The young one's feathers bristled with nervous energy, his breathing fast. The old female moved closer and lowered her head beside his. Calm. Wait. Watch. Below, among the ferns, something moved. The Tenontosaurus was grazing, pulling leaves from the low branches. It didn't know yet that eyes were watching from every shadow. The leader lifted his tail slightly, a silent command. The pack began to spread out. No sound, just movement. To the right, two adults slipped between rocks, circling downwind. To the left, the old female and the younger male crawled low through the brush. The juvenile stayed behind a tree, trembling with excitement. He wanted to move, but he had to learn patience. The Tenontosaurus lifted its head, chewing slowly, ears twitching. It smelled something, but the wind was wrong. It carried its scent away from the predators. It took a few more steps, heavy and slow, tail swinging behind like a log. Every Utahraptor froze at once. Not a feather moved. Then the leader began to move again. 1 step, 2 steps. He was close enough to see the dust roll off the prey's skin. This was the most dangerous part. If they failed now, they'd get nothing but broken bones. He gave the signal, a low, almost inaudible click. The old female moved first. She darted from the brush and hissed loud. The Tenontosaurus turned toward her. That was the plan. The others came from the sides like arrows. The valley exploded in noise. The Tenontosaurus roared, a deep, rough sound that made the ground shake. It swung its massive tail, missing one raptor by inches and smashing a bush flat. The leader leapt high, claws forward, landing on its side. His sickle-shaped claw cut deep but didn't hold. The Tenontosaurus twisted, throwing him off. Dust and feathers filled the air. Another raptor jumped for its neck but caught only a scrape of skin. The prey screamed, stomping wildly. One foot came down hard. Crunch. A young raptor shrieked and rolled away with a broken leg. The juvenile froze, eyes wide, seeing blood for the first time. The old female grabbed him by the neck feathers and dragged him back. This was no time for fear. This was survival. The leader circled again, panting. His shoulder bled, but he didn't stop. He lunged low this time under the Tenontosaurus's tail and slashed the tendon in its leg. The animal stumbled. That was the turning point. The prey crashed to its knees, breathing hard, blood darkening the dust. The raptors closed in from all sides. The leader climbed its back again, digging deep, while the others tore at the sides. The Tenontosaurus tried to rise but couldn't. The juvenile watched, heart pounding. He took a hesitant step forward. The old female nudged him closer, pushing him toward the fallen beast. He bit for the first time. Not deep, not strong, but enough to feel what it meant to be a hunter. The Tenontosaurus gave one last cry, long and heavy, before it fell still. The valley became silent again, except for the breathing of the pack. The leader stood over the body, chest rising and falling slowly. His feathers were red with blood and dust. Around him, the others waited. There was no chaos now, only order. They had earned their meal. One by one they fed, the leader first, then the others. The young one ate last, but proudly. When the first stars appeared, they left only bones behind, gleaming pale under the moonlight. The hunt was over, the rules had been followed, and the valley belonged to them for tonight. The hunt was over. The pack had eaten. Bones lay scattered across the dirt, shining pale under the light of a half-moon. The air smelled of iron and dust. Utahraptors rested in the shadows near the kill site, their bellies full, their feathers ruffled with dried blood. The leader sat apart from the others, his golden eyes still open. He never slept deeply after a hunt. The land never stayed quiet for long. Insects buzzed. The wind turned cooler, whispering through the canyon walls. The young raptor snored softly, head tucked beneath his wing. The old female lay beside him, half awake, keeping her ear to the ground. The silence was strange. Even the frogs by the river had stopped calling. The leader's head lifted. Something in the air changed. The smell, faint but wrong. Not Utahraptor, not Tenontosaurus. Something else. He rose slowly, every movement controlled. The rest of the pack stirred at once, no word, no sound. They simply knew. Beyond the ridge, dark shapes moved, large ones slow. The scent became clearer now, thick, heavy, reptilian. Not another pack of raptors. This was something bigger. A branch cracked. A low growl rolled through the night. The Utahraptors froze. The old female's feathers flared slightly along her neck. Her eyes caught the faint light. fear mixed with readiness. The shadows parted, and 3 large figures appeared under the moonlight. Ceratosaurs, smaller than a T-Rex but heavier than any raptor. Scavengers, but dangerous ones. They had smelled the kill. The leader stepped forward, low to the ground, shoulders tense. He hissed long and sharp. It wasn't a challenge, it was a warning. The carcass behind them was theirs. The biggest Ceratosaurus ignored it. Its head swung slowly from side to side, eyes glowing dull yellow. It stepped closer, claws digging into the dirt. The juvenile whimpered. The old female pushed him behind her tail. The rest of the pack spread slightly, claws digging in. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The air was thick with tension. Then the Ceratosaurus opened its mouth and roared. The sound shook dust from the cliffs. The leader hissed back louder than before, and the night exploded. The Ceratosaurus charged, tail whipping, jaws wide. The leader leapt sideways, claws flashing. One of the raptors jumped on its flank but was thrown off immediately. Another raptor darted in to bite its leg, but got slammed by the tail. The sound of the fight echoed through the canyon. Claws on stone, screams, the crack of bones. The old female kept the juvenile behind a fallen log. She turned, eyes bright, ready to defend. One of the smaller ceratosaurs spotted them and lunged. She moved fast, not back, but forward, meeting it head-on. Her claws slashed across its snout. The creature screamed, snapping blindly. She jumped again, biting deep into its neck, feathers spraying in the wind. It fell sideways, crashing into the mud. The leader faced the largest Ceratosaurus. The two circled, both panting, both bleeding. The bigger predator roared again and lunged. The leader ducked, slashing upward. His claw tore a gash under its throat. Blood sprayed across the rocks. The beast stumbled, crashed, and didn't rise again. The raptors gathered near him, trembling but alive. 2 were injured, 1 limping badly. The night was far from quiet. The smell of blood would draw others. By dawn, the sky had turned pale gray. Mist crawled over the valley. The Utahraptors stood around the remains of the battlefield, bones, blood, feathers, and prints of claws deep in the dirt. They had won, but not without loss. One raptor lay still beside the fallen Ceratosaurus. The old female nudged his body gently, then stepped back. The pack waited in silence. Even the juvenile understood. The leader climbed a rock and looked toward the east. The sun began to rise, light spilling across the canyon. For a moment, the warmth touched his feathers, and he closed his eyes. They were hunters, but tonight had shown him something more. Even hunters could become prey. He gave a short, low call, the sound that meant move. The pack gathered what was left of the meal, then turned away from the battlefield. They walked single file along the ridge until they vanished into the fog, leaving behind only silence and dust. The land belonged to no one for long. Night had passed, but the land did not forget the noise and blood. The Utahraptors moved before sunrise, single file along a narrow ledge that wrapped around the canyon wall. Their steps were careful, their bodies were tired, but the pack was still together, and that was what mattered. The leader walked first. The old female guarded the rear. The juvenile stayed between them, copying their pace, tail level, eyes forward. Below them, a dry riverbed twisted like a pale scar through the rock. In the distance, the hills opened into a valley that none of them had hunted before. Change meant risk. It also meant food. The leader stopped at a high point and tasted the air. No giant breath, no heavy reptile musk. The wind brought only dust, fern, and the cool of early day. He flicked his tail, a quiet signal to move on. The pack had reasons to leave. The last 2 days had cost them. Fights, wounds, a loss that still pressed against the old female's chest. The carcasses they left behind would call in more scavengers and bigger hunters. Staying would mean fighting the same battles again. Moving could break that pattern. The leader understood this without words. He stepped off the ledge and led them into the new valley. The ground changed as they walked. The canyon wall gave way to low ridges scattered with thorn trees and patches of hardy ferns. The soil here was darker, packed with grit that held tracks more clearly than the powdery dust behind them. The leader stopped often, reading the ground like a story. Small bird prints, fresh lizard trails, the split hoof patterns of a mammal-sized herbivore. Good signs. The pack spread out but stayed within sight. They were not hunting. They were mapping. By mid-morning, they reached a shallow basin with a trickle of water, cold and clean where it seeped from a rock. The juvenile rushed the last steps and dipped his muzzle to drink too fast, choking on his own excitement. The old female bumped him with her shoulder. Slow down, breathe, drink again. He did, imitating her pace. The leader drank last and the shortest. He was listening. A light drumming rose from the south. Not thunder, not a giant. Hooves, many, light, quick. A herd. The pack moved up the nearest slope, bellies low, and looked down across the basin. There they were, a ribbon of small herbivores, agile bodies and sensitive ears, flowing around a cluster of shrubs. They were watchful, nervous, built to run. Perfect for training, but not worth the risk today. The leader let them pass. The pack would eat soon, but not yet. First, they needed something better than luck. They needed a home point. They followed the ridge until they found it, a place where two rocks formed a natural gate, and a thorn tree leaned across, making shade even at noon. Just beyond, a flat shelf held good sight lines into the basin and toward the river cut. The leader walked the perimeter and circled back. He pressed his side against the rock and left a thin dusting of feather scent. Then he dragged his claw in 3 parallel lines. Boundary. Message sent. The juvenile copied him, making shallow, crooked lines. The old female did not correct him. The copy was the lesson. The time would smooth it. They hunted in the afternoon, not for a big kill, but for the right test. The leader chose a target he knew the pack could manage without breaking bones, an older, slower ornithopod that had fallen behind a herd. The hunt moved like their best ones, wide circle, quiet steps, split attention. The old female drew the first look. The subadults cut the path. The leader made the clean strike to the leg tendon and moved away before a kick could find him. The dinosaur fell. The pack closed. The work was quick. No show, no mess, only order and speed. They ate in turns, leader, adults, subadults, juvenile. During feeding, the leader made the juvenile pause twice and back away to test him. The youngster obeyed faster the second time. Progress. When they finished, they carried what remained under the leaning thorn and hid the bones from the sky. Vultures learned trails faster than most packs. The afternoon heat grew heavy. The Utahraptors rested in shade, eyes slitted but ears open. Every small sound moved across the ground and into their bones. The scrape of a beetle, the soft clack of a twig. The old female cleaned the juvenile's shoulder where a thorn had cut him. She used shallow, careful bites. The juvenile leaned into it, calm at last. The wind shifted again, colder now. The leader stood and tasted the air. A new scent rode the breeze. Faint, not predator, not prey. Rain. Far off, but coming. Rain meant the valley would change. Tracks washed thin, scents reset. New water pooled where rock funneled it. It also meant cover. Raptors hunted well when sound softened and the sky dimmed. He flicked his tail and moved to the lookout shelf. The pack followed and stood in a half circle, the new valley laid out before them like a map they were just beginning to draw. The leader did not feel victory. He felt something better. Options. The first drops fell at dusk. They tapped the rock, tapped the thorn leaves, and gathered in tiny beads along the Utahraptor's feathers. The valley darkened to a deep green gray. The pack shifted closer together. Rain sharpened their eyes and dulled the world beyond a few lengths. It wrapped sound in a soft blanket. To some hunters, this would be trouble. To them, it was a tool. The leader led them along the ridge path toward the river cut. Water already ran there in a thin sheet, turning the dry scar into a shallow stream. Fresh smells slid across its surface. The leader sorted them quickly. Turtle, mammal, bird, and, there, Tenontosaurus. Not a big one, but not small. Enough to test the valley's promise. He angled the pack into a slow approach, keeping the wind and rain at their backs so their scent would wash forward and downward, tangled in water and stone. They saw it at the bend, a dark shape, head down, stripping wet ferns, tail twitching at flies. The leader took the pack's measure. They were tired but unbroken. The juvenile's posture was right. Low, balanced, ready to freeze, ready to spring. The old female watched his tail as much as the prey. She could stop him with a flick if excitement outran sense. The leader gave a soft click. The old female stepped left into the rain-dark brush. A subadult mirrored right. The juvenile stayed by the rock, eyes locked on the leader's shoulder. The leader moved forward 3 steps, then 2 more, then 1, until the Tenontosaurus's ear turned. He stopped. The prey let out a soft grunt and went back to feeding. The rain covered the rest. The strike when it came was clean. The old female showed herself first. A flash of movement where the prey could see it. The Tenontosaurus turned toward her. The leader cut in from the side, slashed the rear tendon, and backed out. A subadult grabbed and released, opening a second wound. The prey stumbled, slipped in the mud, and dropped hard on its knees. The pack closed. The leader climbed the back and dug in. The old female took the neck and twisted. The work ended fast. No waste. The rain washed the dust off their feathers while they stood, listening for anything larger that might have heard. Nothing answered but water. They ate again, and this time the leader let the juvenile feed earlier. A reward and a test of control. The youngster took his bites and stepped back when the leader glanced at him. Better. The storm settled into a steady whisper. The Utahraptors carried what remained up to the thorn gate and hid it where the cliff overhang kept the ground dry. When the rain softened to mist, the leader walked to the boundary marks and refreshed them. 3 claw lines deeper now in the wet soil, and a slow rub of feathers against stone. He added a 4th line, shorter, at an angle. Not a challenge, a signature. A message to any pack that could read, this ground is watched by minds, not just teeth. He stood for a long moment at the shelf edge, the valley breathing below him. The old female came to his side and sat without touching. The juvenile curled beneath the thorn arch and closed his eyes, the sound of rain in his ears. The subadults took turns at the perimeter, heads up, then down, then up again, scanning the green dark. The first break in the clouds showed a strip of pale sky. Morning would be clear. The leader closed his eyes and opened them again, not sleeping, just setting the image of this valley into the part of his head that held the pack's map. He tasted the wind once more, only water and stone and their own work. He flicked his tail, once the quiet signal of completion. They had not won the land. Land was never won. It was only kept hour by those who could think together and move as one. But for now, for this new dawn, the valley belonged to them. He was not the biggest. He was not the strongest. But he was one of the smartest hunters to ever walk this planet. For millions of years, Utahraptor ruled with speed, teamwork, and precision. Every step he took left a story of survival written in the dust of time. He didn't hunt for glory, he hunted to live, and that's what made him a legend. Even after his kind disappeared, the mark of Utahraptor remained. In the stones, in the fossils, in our imagination, he was more than just a hunter. He was a symbol of balance, between power and intelligence, between life and extinction. And in every story we tell, Utahraptor still runs free.